Join me in a beautiful garden home as we explore the seasons of change right after this. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, where we're always exploring ways to create more beautiful outdoor living spaces. Now, today's show, we're going to focus on change and the passage of time in the garden. And what better place than this to do that? We'll also look at the importance of color in the garden, learn about focal points, and get some ideas on screening and framing views. Plus, we'll take a look at having some fun in the garden through whimsy. Ready to get started? Let's go. The garden home is about blurring the lines between inside and outside. It's about creating spaces around the house and expanding our living space outdoors. They've done a great job here in this garden. You know, when I create a garden home, I fall back on 12 principles of design, and one of the most important is focal point. Certainly this house serves as an exceptional focal point in this garden. From the looks of this place, you'd think that we were somewhere in New England at a very old home. But you might be surprised to know that we're in the heart of the South at a fairly new residence. In this garden, color is also an important element of design. From the beautiful fall foliage and asters to the amazing spring display that's a profusion of rose blooms and poppies. As you can see, color is a key component to this garden space. Throughout today's show, we're going to focus on a variety of the design principles, including color. But right now, I want to focus on the principle of time. Now, I know time is an abstract concept, but you know it has very real results. Take this house as an example. If you stumbled upon this property, you might think you'd been transported back in time to New England in the 1690s. But actually, this house is very modern with wonderful details. Now, let's take a look at how time affects the garden. Every season, this place has a distinct look and feel. I visited here in late spring, just around Mother's Day, and I was taken away by the display of roses, poppies, hollyhocks, foxglove, and Louisiana iris. And now, just a few short months later, the garden has a completely different look as it puts on its last show before winter sets in. And that's exactly what's going on here with this magnificent dogwood tree. Just look at the spectacular foliage and these wonderful red berries. You know, I love any plant that can help me track time in the garden. And this dogwood tree is a great example. In the spring, the tree is covered with large white blooms. Then in summer, nice clean green leaves. In the fall, well, you can see what's going on here. And then in the winter, the red berries are present along with these buds for next year's flowers. You know, there are many plants that can give us interest throughout all the seasons. Another good example is the rose. And here in this garden, roses play an important role in the framework of the garden. One of the things I love about roses, particularly climbing roses, is that they can grow to great heights in just a short amount of time. What this does is help give your garden a look of instant age. The beautiful rose arbor on this property is covered with new dawn roses, one of my favorite roses to design with because it's so easy to grow and does exceptionally well in most areas of the country. In fact, if you're skeptical about your ability to grow roses, then maybe it's time you gave new dawn a try. I like this rose because the color of the blooms are pale pink, so they'll go with just about any color scheme. And the flowers are mildly fragrant, and boy do they bloom. New Dawn is a vigorous climber that can grow up to 20 feet, so they're perfect for growing on fences or using on a trellis. New Dawn isn't considered one of those old-fashioned or heritage varieties of roses, even though it was introduced in the 1930s. However, it still maintains some of those exceptional qualities the old-fashioned roses have, such as a slight fragrance. It's easy to care for, and it's low maintenance. Just take a look at these dark green glossy leaves. They just seem to be naturally resistant to pests and other problems, and that's a nice change. If you really love roses, but you're not into maintenance, you should give one of these a try. Just make sure you give it plenty of sun and lots of room to grow. You see, this plant is only 5 years old. Climbing roses look beautiful in so many landscapes, even containers. You see, rose supports don't have to be fancy. In fact, here's a rustic support that I designed specifically for using in containers. It's made up of rustic timbers or sticks cut with points on the ends and attached with nails and wire. Climbing roses are also beautiful against houses. I grow New Dawn on the side of my garage with tremendous results, but of course my home is wooden and attaching a support to the rose is fairly easy. However, supporting anything against brick or masonry is going to be a little more difficult. After encountering this challenge on several design projects, I came up with a little system. Let me show you how it works. First, I find the appropriate place on the wall and drill a hole into the mortar joint with a 1/4-inch drill bit. Then I place a lead anchor in the hole and tap it in to make sure that it's secure. To hold the canes, I use a number 8 screw hook and twist it into the lead of the anchor. As I do this, the lead expands to fill the hole. For the last step, I take a 6 to 8 inch piece of a medium gauge wire and run it through a 3/4 inch diameter piece of clear vinyl tubing. That piece is about 4 inches long. Then I just wrap it around the cane and attach it to the hook. This tubing will keep the wire from cutting into the canes, and the hooks will allow you to remove it from time to paint. Now with the rose fully supported, it can be better appreciated. Like climbing roses, other plants seem to speak to this element of time in the garden. For instance, Boston ivy is a favorite of mine. I just love the way it can take over a wall or a trellis and give it an old world look in just a few years. It's interesting how a well-planted shady path seems to slow us down, causing us to pause and appreciate the time we're spending in a garden. You might be thinking that there aren't many exciting shade plants outside the traditional ferns, hostas, and patience we have to choose from. But plant breeders have been working overtime to find ways to turn our heads when it comes to shade gardens. Take, for instance, this interesting little lamium called Anne Greenaway that I discovered at a marketplace for new plant introductions. While it does flower, this low-growing plant is best known for its foliage, a blend of dark and pale green, chartreuse, and silver. This plant will grow to about 18 inches wide and prefers well-drained, humus-rich soil that doesn't become too dry. Lamium is an excellent companion plant to another shade lover, Aquilegia origami. You might not recognize it by this name, though. You're probably more familiar with its other name, Columbine. Its flowers look like tiny starbursts, with spurs extending from the backside of each blossom. When Columbine's in full bloom in my garden, it always turns lots of heads. People can't help but remark on its beauty. Typically, Columbine has a short period of bloom, but plant breeders are working on new varieties that actually have an extended bloom season, up to 12 weeks with some varieties, like this one called origami, named after the Japanese art of paper folding. Columbine comes in such a wide range of colors. Now, all the hybrids that you see that are a part of this breeding program were actually derived from the wild Columbine that we see growing in many parts of the country. Columbine is happiest in shade to partial shade and prefers a well-drained, fertile soil. You'll want to water it regularly to keep the soil moderately moist. Now, I like to combine Columbine with other shade-tolerant plants, such as spiderwort, Virginia sweetspire, hosta, fern, and variegated Solomon seal, and ground covers such as lamium. Now, before we leave this idea of time in the garden, I wanted you to meet the homeowner, Nancy Porter. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Alan.
It's such a pleasure to see you.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
I love coming out here.
Well, I love having you.
This is such a beautiful place. What was your source of inspiration for the house?
Oh, I guess it was my love of antiques. In looking at antiques books and magazines, I saw pictures of these houses.
Well, it's so wonderful, the feel you get when you come out here, particularly in the autumn. Well, in every season, really. It's full of charm.
Yeah, well, thank you.
How did you put this together? Did you have a set of plans, or?
Oh, no. I drew the plans myself.
Really?
Yes, I spent a year at the dining room table before we started building it, working on plans.
Well, had you had any experience building houses before?
No, absolutely not.
Well, you did a masterful job.
Thank you. It was hard work.
And the garden really is an extension of the house, isn't it?
Hopefully, yes.
Oh, I think it works very well. I love the way that you've divided the garden into a series of rooms that wraps around the house.
Right.
These sugar maples certainly add to the authenticity.
Yes, that's why I planted them here.
We've planted them all over the property.
Yes, right.
Oh, they're truly beautiful. Now, Nancy, you didn't learn gardening out of a book like you learned architecture.
No. I learned gardening from my mother. She was a big gardener.
Wonderful. So that's where your green thumb comes from.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look at the garden.
Okay.
Nancy, you still have so much in bloom.
Yes, I do, amazingly.
This salvia is beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's hard to beat Salvia leucantha,
Right.
the Mexican sage.
Absolutely.
And then over here we have Salvia garanetica. Mm-hmm. That's such a good one. What a great
has
blue.
been so beautiful all summer.
And blue mist flower,
Right.
the perennial ageratum. You know, what I love about this garden is that it's enclosed. Even though you have all this space, you've enclosed this area around the house.
That's to make it easy.
It makes it feel more manageable, doesn't it? Now, you grow a lot of vegetables over here on this side of the house,
Yes, in the
don't
spring
you?
we have lettuce and onions and sugar snap peas and radishes and spinach.
All
Lots
sorts of
things.
good things to eat.
Yes. I have some anemones blooming over on the other side of the house if you want to see.
Oh, I'd love to see them. It's a perfect season for them.
Yes, they've been really pretty this fall.
Boy, these Japanese anemones are putting on quite
Aren't
a show.
they, though? They've just been beautiful this fall.
This is one of my favorite fall blooming
Mine,
perennials.
too.
They're just gorgeous. You know, once you get them in a situation where they're happy,
Yeah.
where they get morning light rather than hot afternoon sun, they really do multiply.
Yes, they like it here on the east side of the house.
You know, I grow them along with ferns and toad lilies, the
Oh, I love
Tricernus.
toad lilies.
Aren't they great? They look like little tiny orchids.
Yes, they do.
Wow, look at all of this celosia over here. Did this stand come up volunteer?
Yes, it comes up from seeds every year.
Well, the same happens in my garden.
Really?
It's such a brilliant color.
Isn't it?
Oh,
And
it's
it
just
dries
gorgeous.
beautifully.
They produce so many seeds.
Yes, they do.
It's really quite amazing.
Yes.
And look how you're feeding the birds.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. So you've taken a cup and a saucer and put it on a stand.
Right.
Marvelous. How did you do that?
I'll show you. Well, the first thing you do is find the teacups or other ceramic pieces. These came from a local junk shop, and I don't think we paid more than $5. I got some help with drilling the holes in the cups from Duncan. We used a 1/8 inch ceramic tile bit to start the hole and a 1/4 inch masonry bit to make the hole larger. Next, we took a 36 inch long, 1/4 inch wide threaded metal rod and we screwed a nut about 1/2 inch from the top, then laid on a washer and finally the teacup and saucer. Then inside the teacup, we placed another washer and another nut to hold it all together. And to give it a decorative touch, we cut copper tubing. This is 1/2 inch wide and about 30 inches long, and slipped the threaded metal piece down into it. Finally, we placed it in the garden, and then all we had to do was push the copper tubing into the ground about 2 or 3 inches, and then insert the threaded metal rod down into the ground through the copper tubing.
Like millions of Americans, Olga Clifton has enjoyed watching and feeding the birds in her Louisiana garden for years. But Olga's passion for these beautiful winged creatures expanded from putting up a few simple bird feeders to actually transforming her garden home into bird habitat.
But we have lived here and our yard has evolved into many things, from something that looked like the cover of Better Homes and Gardens to a wildlife habitat of what it's turned into now. We have lots of non-native plants, but also lots of native plants that attract birds into our yard. So this is the world we have created for ourselves. When we lose habitat down here, then the birds that normally rest and forage and fatten up here can't make it. These birds don't have this habitat. Without green belts that allow these birds to use them as highways from my area into other areas of the United States, there'll be no more birds. Their numbers are dwindling, and we think it's because of the destruction of habitat. You know, we can't just keep taking and taking and taking from the earth. We have to think about the other creatures that live here.
As you can see, Olga's approach to caring for the birds is centered around understanding and establishing sustainable habitat for them. Her involvement with the Nature Conservancy and the Audubon Society over the years has truly made a difference in her part of the world. What a great idea. I can see the birds love it.
Yes, they do.
And the perfect environment here for them with all this colorful celosia. Now, you mentioned earlier that you dry this.
Yes, I do.
You actually dry a lot of different things from the garden, don't you?
I've developed a system for drying. I'd like to show it to you.
Yeah, sure. Nancy, the front of your house is so beautiful, and the color, it's the perfect backdrop for all of this foliage and bloom.
Yes, it is, isn't it? The front door is in the style of the Ashley House in Deerfield, Massachusetts.
Really?
Yes.
Well, it's quite a flourish on this simple salt
Yes,
box
it is.
facade.
Well, come on in and let me show you my dried flowers.
I'd love
what
to.
I'm doing.
Well, this is the season to be bringing the last few things in.
Yes, it is.
My goodness, look at all of this. And you grew all these things or
Yes.
cut them off the place here.
Yes. And this is
Amazing.
the fun part of it.
Here we've got some Artemisia. I guess this is Silver
I
King.
think so.
Boy, that dries beautifully.
Oh, it
just,
does.
Just
It's
look at
so
that
beautiful.
color. Works with everything, doesn't it? And look at this wonderful little foxtail grass.
Right.
And then your hydrangeas. Well, they're hard to beat dried.
Yes.
And look at the color. That blue color is really marvelous,
Isn't that
Nancy.
pretty?
Now, these are some hydrangeas you grew this
Yes,
year. Tremendous. And of course, there's Linaria over there, our money plant. And the larkspur, my favorite.
I had so much larkspur this year.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. Look at how the color has held.
Yes.
It's
and that's this
tremendous.
spring's. I've got some back here from last year, too.
Now, I notice you've bundled the flowers with how many stems? Is that 5 to 10 stems?
Yeah.
And then from there, once you harvest it, what do you do with it, Nancy?
Then I hang it over a coat hanger in my coat closet, which is a wonderful place for drying flowers because it has a return air vent in it.
So it draws the moisture
Yes,
out of the
yes.
plants rather quickly.
And it's dark. It's perfect for drying.
So that's the secret.
Yes.
Very good. Well, what a wonderful example of the bounty you can draw from the garden
Right.
and bring inside.
And this is the most fun part of my gardening, I think.
Is it really?
It is.
Collecting
I
and
enjoy
saving.
this, yes.
Well, it's just tremendous. This way you can enjoy the garden in every
Right.
season. Well, thank you so much for having us, Nancy.
Well, thank you for being here. I've enjoyed it.
It's always a pleasure to come out here.
Well, thank you. I love having you.
It's amazing all of the varieties you can dry. As a container, I'm using this old tin tub. Since you don't have to water dried flowers, you can use just about anything. And to hold the flowers in place, I'm using a floral foam. I begin to arrange by taking the tall, spiky things and placing them in the center of the arrangement and working out from there. Then I reach for flowers that are round and bold to contrast the spikes. And as I work from the center to the edge of the arrangement, I progressively cut the bundle shorter. Now it's just a matter of filling in all of the spaces that are left. And I'm using dried hydrangea, coxcomb, and globe amaranth. Dried flowers are certainly beautiful, but to keep things like ornamental grasses from shattering, just give them a little shot of hairspray. And if you apply the essential oils of herbs like lavender onto the petals, this can have a wonderful aroma. So far in this show, we've touched on the design elements of color and whimsy, and also on time. I mentioned focal points, using this beautiful home as an example. And now I want to talk a little about views. You see, in the garden home, we can create framed views. We can enhance what we see. For instance, this arbor frames the view of the house, which serves as a focal point. And the arbor, well, under it, you can get little vistas or vignettes of the landscape beyond. Views are also framed from inside of the home to the outside. I like to think of views like framing pictures in the garden. Just like framing a picture, we can also crop or screen out views we don't want to see. These homeowners have done this by creating a screen of trees between their garden home and the street beyond. Not only does it help to shield their view from what might at times be unsightly, but it also helps to buffer them from urban noises, which helps to give the garden a more private and secluded feeling. Now you may be thinking, oh, it's easy to screen or frame a view if you have this much space. You can plant a tree over here or shrubs there. But what about situations like neighborhoods where the houses are close together, or in the city where most people garden on a terrace or a balcony? Well, you see, there's a way to screen a view in any size garden home. Let me give you some examples. As you would suspect, large gardens have the luxury of using hedges and trees, but some small gardens can also benefit from these plants. In this small garden, I used bleached crabapple trees to provide a screen. In another small garden I designed, Italian cypress helped to block unsightly views of a nearby condominium. And I'm not the only designer interested in screening views. A Chicago landscape architect provided a touch of privacy thanks to this implied wall. It's a metal grid that serves as a support for hanging baskets. In this same vein, I created a screen on which to grow a vine, which provides a patio garden with some privacy. It's simply made with 2 terracotta pots and a trellis. As you can see, screening the view applies to any size garden. Another thing that applies to any size garden is a container. Let's take a look at some for all seasons. Now I have to say, my garden just wouldn't be the same without container gardening. You see, I use it for growing both food and flowers. It's a terrific space saver for small gardens and a great time saver for busy gardeners. When I put a container together, I often follow a simple recipe that goes like this. Plants that are tall and spiky go in the middle or toward the back. Then I fill in with something round and full, and then allow plants to cascade or spill over the edge. When these plant shapes are combined, it opens up a whole world of possibilities. When choosing plants for containers, I like to think about the longevity of the plant. For instance, garden mums and other perennials can be moved from the container once they finish flowering out into the garden for bloom next season. Containers really do play a role in my garden in every season. During the winter, I've created containers using items such as twigs of spiky elements, ornamental grasses, forced bulbs, evergreen topiaries, even pansies and ornamental cabbage make charming additions to the winter garden. For spring, I love combining bulbs with lettuces. It's both beautiful and edible. Spring containers full of pastel colors echo the promise of the seasons ahead. Summer containers are some of my favorites because you can really get bold with color by using a wide array of colorful annuals. I love using purple fountain grasses, petunias, geraniums, terenia, and lantana. And in the fall, well, there are even more possibilities. Take this container I put together using canna, tropicana, as the focal point. The blooms are orange, but hey, with foliage that looks this great, who needs flowers? For a total contrast of texture, I'm using this fine-bladed ornamental grass. The feathery plumes are as beautiful as flowers, and they move gracefully in the wind. Now to fill in, I've chosen a salvia and this curry plant, as well as some straw flowers. And to cascade down the front, this lamb's-ear and verbena does the trick. Now there is a method to my madness, as they say. You see, I've used my basic formula, something tall and spiky in the back, and some full plants here in the center, and then those that are low growing and cascading across the front. The great thing about this planting is that nothing goes to waste. I can use everything in my garden. I'll either transplant it later in the fall or this spring. Well, that's it for today's show. We've seen just how important the element time is in the garden. Nancy's given us some wonderful examples here from her garden, the way she uses plants and the strong architectural style she's adopted. We also saw how adding color and a touch of whimsy to the garden can help bring it to life. And what would a garden be without screening and framing views to bring you more privacy and visual interest? And don't forget about those containers. They're perfect for any size garden. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Allen Smith's Garden Home.
Let's face it, we all desire to have a little privacy in our gardens. That's why the elements of design enclosure and screening the view are so important. We'll take a look at how I've used enclosure in my garden. We'll also travel to Chicago to see a beautiful garden home where screened views play a key role. Plus, I've got a craft project that will help you bring the garden home indoors. You won't want to miss it.